to finally that recap video that I promised you. Better late than never. Today we're just gonna look at all the notes that you guys had, and we're just gonna browse through it very quickly. We started talking about the Middle Ages. That was the first subject that we did. We only spent one lesson on this, so it wasn't that big. And after that, we talked about the Renaissance. For right now, I'm going to start with the Renaissance because I know that the information that we need about the Middle Ages are in this slide as well. So we started talking about the Middle Ages, which started around the year 500 AD until the year 1500. And as you might remember, is the people from the Renaissance, so the time after the Middle Ages, they called it the Middle Ages. And the reason why they called it the Middle Ages is because it was in between two better ages, so between the times of the Greeks and the Romans and the time of the discoverers, reformers, the Renaissance. So it was in the middle, and the reason why the Middle Ages are seen as such a negative period of time is because of the plague. So a lot of people passed away during the Middle Ages, and death was something that was really visible around you because a lot of people passed away. So religion was very, very important during the Middle Ages. So here you can see the clergy, so the people that belonged to the church or worked for the church, they were very important during the Middle Ages because people were so concerned about dying because of the plague. People were more and more religious, so the Catholic Church was very, very important, and people believed in going to heaven after you died or to hell. So they lived their entire life based on the fact that one day they would pass away, one day they would die, and they would go to heaven or to hell. And that's why they lived according to the saying, memento mori. So in Dutch, gedenk te sterven, remember that one day you will die, and that you have to make sure that you go to heaven. So life on earth might not be as good as you would want it to be, but one day you will die after you have lived a perfect life on earth as a good Christian, and then you would go to heaven. So that was the saying they had during the Middle Ages, memento mori. During the Middle Ages, you were born in a certain social layer, so you belonged to the nobility. The knights also belonged to the nobility, or you belonged to the farmers, or people that lived in the village. Remember that for this we drew a pyramid on the board, looking at these social layers, and the biggest layer was the farmers and the villains. And we're already going to go to the time of the Renaissance, because in the Renaissance we have this new social layer emerging in Italy. So we have this new social layer which is made out of the rich traders. And the reason that the rich traders, or this social layer, emerged in Italy there, and the Renaissance started there are a few reasons for this. One of the reasons, of course, is that in Italy we still had a lot of remains from the Roman Empire. So it was very easy to start looking back to the time of the Greeks and the Romans, because as you probably remember, hopefully, the Renaissance means rebirth of the classical times. So rebirth of being interested in the Greek and the Roman culture, things that they wrote down, science, etc., art, for example. And because in Italy there were a lot of remains, it was very easy to go there and see all these great things that the Romans did and the Greeks did. So another reason why it started in Italy is, and now you will understand this, because the Silk Road and the Arab traders that would travel from Asia through the Silk Road to Europe, they came into Italy. So Italy was the place where all the trade from Asia to Europe came into Europe. So that's why they had such a big social layer, so a big group of traders who became very, very rich. So we have these famous families like the Medici family controlling Italy, and because they have this money now, these rich traders, they want more and more power. They wanna live like the nobility does, and because of that, they start spending a lot of money into art or science, research about the Greeks and the Romans, etc., etc. So these new leaders were inspired by the ancient Greeks and Romans and their science. So the Renaissance, they wanted to go back to the time of the Greeks and the Romans, and they wanted to rediscover all the knowledge that they already had back then. So they started to question the idea that everything that happened was God's will. So instead of just thinking, okay, why do the leaves fall from the tree? Because God wanted it to. No, why do they fall from the tree? What is happening? What is the science behind that? That's how they started thinking during the time of the Renaissance. So instead of just thinking it's because God wanted it to, they wanted to do their own research and try to figure it out by themselves. So thinking, and trying to discover new things becomes more and more important. So this is called the Renaissance, the rebirth of the classical times. And I'm very sorry if you hear a lot of noises around me, that's because I'm sitting outside. An important part of the Renaissance movement was art. So art was a very important part, such as that family, the Medici, they started investing a lot of money into art. And yeah, art was one of the ways to show that you were rich, that you had enough money to put into getting a painting of yourself. And that also meant that, art changed. So it showed a new way of thinking that started during the 15th century, the end of the 15th century. So instead of only painting things that have something to do with religion or biblical stories, people started painting normal people and normal life. That's what they found more and more interesting. So monks were no longer the only people making paintings. Now we have real artists painting paintings, so it becomes a real craft to do instead of something that the clergy does. So while many paintings still showed religious events, so don't forget that people were still very religious during the time of the Renaissance and the time of the discoverers. Religion was still a very important thing, but now also other things become important. So there was a movement towards showing people in their homes. So the church became less important in art, but the church is still very important. Don't forget that. And here you have some paintings from the Renaissance era. So this was in Italy, and later it crossed around the rest of Europe. But it was mostly in Italy. So this already shows you that there was a new way of thinking. Something changed from the Middle Ages. So after that, we started looking at the discoverers. So this all the Renaissance, the discoverers, was during the time of the discoverers and reformers, so 1500 until 1600. We started with lesson 1, and that was about just a general lesson about what are the reform or discoverers, what they discover, why did they started discovering, etc., etc. So discoverers. In the Middle Ages, there were a few things where people were afraid of, and that's the reason why they didn't really travel around the world and why they didn't want to go further than the horizon, so what they could see. The first thing is that the world was flat, so if you went too far, you would fall off the edge. And I know it sounds very dumb to us because we know better, but it was really something that people were afraid of, and it's a very scary thing to be the first person to try and discover that that's not true. So if you look at the horizon, you see a straight line, so it's not a weird thing that they thought that the world was flat. They also thought that if you went too far south, you would burn because the seawater here would be scalding hot, so really hot. The reason they believe this is because the further south you go, the warmer it gets. So who says that it will ever stop getting warmer? Then the third thing that they were afraid of during the Middle Ages is that if you went too far, you would encounter scary sea monsters. And to us, this sounds really dumb, and we know that it's not true. But don't forget that during the Middle Ages, a lot of knowledge was lost because of the plague, because of people dying, because everyone had to be a farmer again. That's why not a lot of people read or wrote things down. So a lot of knowledge was lost, such as these things. And they also started believing in these stories about scary things. And life's quite scary because, yeah, a lot of people were dying and people didn't really get outside their own village because it was too dangerous. Well, the Renaissance really looked at it the rebirth of classical art, knowledge, culture, etc. Back to the time of the Greeks and Romans, there was more and more knowledge about what the world really looked like. The world map looked more and more like the worlds around they got this knowledge from. So here on the picture you can see that now they start drawing maps around instead of as in a square. You can see that some of the areas are still white and nothing is on there. That's because they probably knew that there was land, but they just never went there. And you can even see it over here, all these flames, so that might have meant that it was really hot down there. So they got this knowledge from the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, started reading their text from the time of the Greeks and the Romans, and they got this information from the Arabs because they were already trading. So why did Europeans start to discovering the world in the 15th century? So why were they motivated enough? So one reason is to find a trade route with the East where they do not have to go past the Muslim wealthy guard. And this is also in your book. And I already told you in the lesson, your book will be very important for this lesson. So don't forget about your book. And it tells you about the Ottoman Empire being owning the trade between Asia to Europe. And they would travel over the Silk Road. They would go from Asia or China to Europe, Italy to be more precise, and they would only travel a small part of the road, and then tradesmen would sell their spices, for example, because of course that's one of the most important thing they were trading in. So they would sell their spices to the next person. He would travel a small bit, he would resell the spices, he would travel a small bit. So before the spices finally came to Europe, they were sold a lot already. So every person that sells these spices wants to get a profit or make a profit out of it. So that's why the spices were very, very expensive when they finally came to Europe. So they also wanted to find gold and other riches. They wanted to spread Christianity, more land for the growing population. They also wanted adventure and curiosity. Because of adventure and curiosity, more power, more land is more power, of course. And yeah, because there were better ships that were invented and maps that looked like the real world, which made it possible for them to start discovering the world in this 15th century. I see that this one is still the old PowerPoint, so we'll continue to lesson 2. It's probably, we'll go to lesson 3 first, because then we can continue. Let's see. Who was first? Who came first? Of course, is not correct English. Who was first? It was the Portuguese. The Portuguese were the first explorers because they knew that there was something to get in the southeast. So they knew about all the gold that they would find there. They knew that they would be rich if they would go there themselves instead of just trading with the Arabs. So that's one of the reasons why they wanted to go there. So their goal was to go to the south, to the African coast. The reason why the Portuguese were the first is because of Prince Henry, and his nickname was the Navigator, so Henry the Navigator, and he started the first voyage of discovery, the Eerste Ontdekkingsreis. And because of that, he was the first. The reason he wanted to go was to look for gold, and a religious reason, because he wanted to find the city of Pastor John. Read your textbook, and you'll find some more information about this. He needed more information about what the world looked like and ships, how ships could be better built. So he hired Muslim traders because the Muslim traders were already trading with these parts of the world and they already had this knowledge. So while Europe had the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Ottoman Empire, for example, had a Golden Age. So situations in Europe were very different all over. So the journey was still not easy. You could get a lot of diseases like scurvy, scheurbuik, storm. You could get stuck in a storm. You could sail upon rocks. You could get lost, or the food could be running out. But we already talked about this in the lesson. Then the discovery of America in 1492, and in the slide next to this, or next after this, you'll learn some more about that. But in 1492, Spain started joining the voyages of discovery, and Columbus, in the name of Spain, discovered America. Portugal was not happy about this. Portugal found out that Spain also wanted to participate in discovering the world, and there was a lot of violence between the two countries. And to prevent a war, the Pope had to do something, and what he did is he divided the New World between Spain and Portugal, and I'll show you the map in a second. And this is called the Treaty of Tordesillas, which was signed in 1494. Of course, we know that there will be another fight about this, about the Moluccas Island. So yeah, but this is your textbook as well, so make sure you read this. So here you see the line, so this part belonged to Spain, and this part belonged to Portugal, so they had Africa as well. No homework because you already done that. Let's continue. Lesson 4, the lesson about Columbus that we did. The discovery of America, and of course we talked about the reasons why he didn't discover America. So we had a note. This was a recap. Trade between East and West. In Europe, there was an increasing demand for products from the Far East. This is what we already discussed a second ago. Trade over land was expensive and dangerous through the Middle East, where you had to pay to pass through land. So the Ottoman Empire, they were too strong. So therefore, countries such as Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, France, and Great Britain started looking for alternative routes overseas, and that's why they started those voyages of discovery and tried to find their own sea route to the Indies. Don't forget, with the Indies we mean Asia and parts of Africa, but mostly Asia. That's the Indies. So to the east. So the search for the Indies. More and more European sailors wanted to take part in the voyage of discovery. One of those sailors was the famous Christopher Columbus. So in the name of Spain, he went to try and find a western sea route to the east. So he wanted to sail around the world to get to the east and try and find their own sea route. Of course, we all know that he wasn't that successful because he never went to the Indies, because he stumbled upon America, which actually, was an even bigger invention or bigger discovery than Columbus ever knew, because until the day he died, he thought that he went to the Indies. So on the 12th of October 1492, Columbus discovered America. And we can put our question marks near that statement, because did he really discover America? No, he did not. Because how can you discover an entire populated continent? So there were all these highly advanced, people, or what's the word again? I can't think of the word, but societies. There were highly advanced societies living there, such as the Incas or the Aztecs, and also the Vikings were the first Europeans to really discover America. So Columbus was never the first. Then he thought he was in a different country, so how can you discover something without even knowing it? He called the Native Americans Indians because he thought he was in the Indies. Then we had the entire discussion about Columbus Day in class. Vasco da Gama, that's not true, because the first person sailing around the world was, of course, Magellan, Magelhaas in Dutch. Let's see, lesson 5, that was the last one. We talked about the Columbian Exchange, and hopefully, as you remember, the Columbian Exchange is the Treaty of Tordesillas again. We talked about this. We already talked about this. From now on, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there you can see the Treaty of Tordesillas again. The Columbian Exchange, of course, is the exchange of products between Eurasia, so Europe, Africa, and Asia, to America, such as turnip, grapes, livestock, and of course a very long list of diseases. So that went to America, and we got tobacco, pumpkins, turkey, potatoes, tomatoes back to Europe, so from America to Europe. So it was the exchange of products between the two continents. That's what the Columbian Exchange is. And because of that, a lot of Native Americans, of course, passed away. So, what happened to the Native American population, and how was it possible that these European or Spanish conquerors managed to defeat powerful empires with millions of inhabitants, such as the Aztecs and Incas, with fewer soldiers and a short period of time? We already know this. Their weapons were superior. They had firearms, which the Native Americans did not. They had horses, which scared the Native Americans. The Native Americans had these beliefs that when they someone would save them and would come to Earth to help them, and they believed that these white Europeans that they had never seen before were their gods on Earth and were there to help them, and the Europeans used that to their advantage and kidnapped their leaders and killed them and tried to get all the gold and silver that the Native Americans had out of them. And yeah, of course, the most important reason is the germs that the Europeans brought with them. So, in addition to European swords, firearms, and horses, germs had killed more than 3/4 of the Indians, also known as Native Americans, 1 century after Columbus' arrival. So, after 100 years, already 3/4 of the Native Americans had died, and in total, it was 90%, 90% of the Native Americans that died after the discovery of America by Columbus. So yeah, very terrible, all these terrible things that happened, and believe me, there will be more terrible things that we'll have to discuss that happened during history, and also the Netherlands playing a really big part in that with the VOC and WIC. But that will be a chapter for after the holiday. So yeah, good luck during your test, guys. I believe this was it. This was everything we talked about. Good luck with your test, and yeah, enjoy your holiday. Make sure you're rested when you get back to school. So good luck, everyone. If you have any questions left, just ask me. I'll try to reply, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.